On March 17, 2023, a Friday, 12-year-old Beatriz Oliveira Santos walked out of her home in the Jardim Peri neighborhood on the north side of São Paulo. She told her mother she was going to a friend's house to work on a school project. The sky was overcast with rain forecast for the late afternoon, typical for a São Paulo autumn. Beatriz was wearing blue jeans, a white t-shirt with a floral print, and pink sneakers. She carried only a small lilac backpack and her cell phone. It was 2:37 p.m. when a street security camera captured her walking alone on the sidewalk, heading toward the bus stop. Beatriz was the only child of Marcia Oliveira, a 38-year-old receptionist at a dental clinic, and Paulo Santos, a 42-year-old rideshare driver. She was an exemplary 7th-grade student at the Professor João Silva Municipal School. Teachers and classmates described her as an outgoing, communicative girl with excellent grades. In her spare time, she loved watching YouTube videos and was active on social media, especially TikTok and Instagram. At 7:43 p.m., Marcia, worried that her daughter was late, began calling her cell phone insistently. Every call went straight to voicemail. Growing concerned, she contacted the parents of the friend Beatriz had mentioned, only to discover that her daughter had never arrived. In fact, according to the classmate, there was no school project scheduled for that weekend at all. When I found out she had lied about the project, Marcia later recounted in an interview, my heart went cold. Beatriz had never done anything like that before. At 8:15 p.m., after frantic and fruitless attempts to locate their daughter, the couple went to the local police precinct to report her missing. A report was filed immediately, and due to Beatriz's age, the case was urgently escalated to the Homicide and Personal Protection Division and the state's Missing Persons Department. The first 24 hours were a blur of intense searching. Neighbors, family, and friends formed groups to scour local parks, bus terminals, and subway stations. The military police mobilized teams to assist, while civil police investigators began taking statements from close family and friends. Beatriz's phone had been turned off shortly after she disappeared, making it impossible to track. However, a preliminary analysis of her phone records showed its last connection was at 3:02 p.m. near the shopping center Norte, about 3 kilometers from her home. That night, a heavy rain fell over São Paulo, hampering the search efforts. The temperature dropped to 17 degrees Celsius, heightening fears for the girl's well-being. Every minute that passed was an eternity, Paulo Santos later described in his statement. We couldn't sleep, eat, or think. We just wanted our daughter back. News of Beatriz's disappearance spread rapidly on social media. A Facebook page called Todos por Beatriz, Everyone for Beatriz, was created the next morning, gaining over 5,000 followers in just 12 hours. Flyers with the girl's photo were plastered across the city's north side. The case gained national attention when a major television network aired a report appealing for any information on the student's whereabouts. Police set up special hotlines for anonymous tips. Meanwhile, the Santos's modest 3-bedroom house became an impromptu command center. Relatives arrived constantly to offer support, while lists of searched locations and important phone numbers covered the living room table. On the second day, the lead investigator, Detective Renato Carvalho, held a press conference. We are pursuing several lines of investigation and have not ruled out any possibility, he stated. We ask anyone who may have seen Beatriz after 2:30 p.m. on Friday to contact the authorities immediately. Within the first 48 hours, the police received over 30 tips. Most were from people who thought they had seen a girl matching Beatriz's description in various parts of the city. Every lead was meticulously checked, but none were confirmed. On the morning of the third day, a crucial discovery shifted the entire investigation. While examining Beatrice's personal computer, cybercrime investigators found extensive conversations with an Instagram profile under the name Lucas Mendes. The profile presented him as a 15-year-old guitarist in a new band also living in São Paulo. The messages, which had started 2 months prior, revealed a textbook case of online grooming. It began with casual chats about music and TV shows, then evolved into frequent compliments, shared secrets, and finally romantic declarations. The supposed Lucas had methodically earned Beatrice's trust, forging a strong emotional connection. What we saw was a classic manual of psychological manipulation, explained Detective Claudia Moreira, a cybercrime specialist. The predator presented himself as someone her age with common interests and built a bond of trust over time. The last conversation between Beatrice and Lucas took place on the morning she disappeared. In it, they arranged to meet for the first time at 3:00 p.m. in the food court of the shopping center Norte. Lucas had insisted that Beatrice tell no one about their meeting, claiming he wanted it to be a special surprise. The investigation into the Lucas Mendes profile quickly confirmed it was a complete fabrication. The photos were stolen from the social media account of an American teenager and had been slightly altered. The IP address used to create the account was traced to a cybercafe in the Belém neighborhood on the east side of São Paulo. Armed with this information, investigators requested security footage from the mall. After hours of meticulous review, they spotted Beatrice entering the shopping center at 2:58 p.m. 20 minutes later, the cameras captured her talking with a man who appeared to be between 35 and 40 years old, a far cry from the teenager in the profile pictures. The man was of average height, wearing dark jeans, a black t-shirt, and a baseball cap that partially obscured his face. The footage showed Beatrice was hesitant at first, but seemed to relax after a few minutes of conversation. At 3:37 p.m., they left the mall together and got into a silver car, possibly a Volkswagen Gol. The camera angle made it impossible to read the license plate. That moment we saw our daughter leaving with a complete stranger. It was devastating, Paulo Santos recalled. We realized she had been deceived in the worst way imaginable. The civil police immediately began working to identify the suspect. Forensic technicians enhanced the images to get a clearer view of his partially visible face. A composite sketch was created and distributed to every police department in the state and released to the media. A specialized team from the federal police joined the investigation, bringing additional resources for digital tracking and data analysis. On the fourth day, an employee at a gas station on the Presidente Dutra highway, heading toward Rio de Janeiro, recognized the man from the composite sketch. She testified that he had stopped for gas around 4:00 p.m. on the day of the disappearance. He was accompanied by a young girl who appeared to be asleep in the passenger seat. I thought it was strange because the girl didn't wake up at all, even with all the noise at the station, the employee reported. But he said she was his daughter, just very tired after a long day. The witness remembered he paid in cash and seemed nervous, constantly looking around. Most importantly, the station's security camera had captured a partial license plate of the silver Gol. It began with the letters FDK. With this critical piece of information, the Federal Highway Police were alerted. The Department of Motor Vehicles provided a list of all 237 registered vehicles in the state of São Paulo that matched the make, model, and partial plate. After cross-referencing the car's features and filtering by male owners in the suspect's age range, the list was narrowed to 42 potential targets. Among the names on the list, one stood out: Roberto Almeida Ferreira, 39. A resident of the Guaianazes neighborhood. Ferreira had a prior conviction for sexual harassment and had been investigated 3 years earlier in an unresolved case of online harassment of a teenager. though the case was dismissed for lack of evidence. When investigators arrived at his registered address, they discovered Ferreira had moved out 8 months prior. Neighbors said he had left after a dispute with the landlord and provided no forwarding address. It was a moment of immense frustration, Detective Carvalho recalled. We had a strong suspect, but he had vanished. Every passing hour was critical for Beatrice's safety. The search for Roberto Ferreira intensified. On the morning of the 5th day, an anonymous call drastically changed the course of the investigation. A man who refused to give his name reported seeing a silver car parked for at least 3 days in a remote area near the Billings Reservoir, in the far south of São Paulo. The informant said he noticed the vehicle because it was unusual to see a car in good condition abandoned there for so long. He also mentioned a strong, unpleasant odor beginning to emanate from the location. A tactical team, accompanied by case investigators and forensic experts, was immediately dispatched. The area was a region of small farms and houses on the reservoir's edge, with unpaved access roads and little traffic. At 9:47 a.m., the officers located the vehicle, a silver Volkswagen Gol, license plate FDK 7215, registered to Roberto Almeida Ferreira. The car was parked in a wooded area, partially concealed by vegetation, about 200 meters from the water's edge. The vehicle's windows were closed and condensation had formed on the inside. Following protocol, the officers surrounded the car, a palpable tension in the air. At 10:12 a.m., after confirming no movement inside, they forced open the driver's side door. What they found confirmed their worst fears. The body of a man, later identified as Roberto Ferreira, was in the driver's seat with a gunshot wound to his right temple. A .38 caliber pistol lay between his legs. A quick search of the car revealed no sign of Beatrice, adding a desperate urgency to the scene. In the glove compartment, however, investigators found a printed map marked with handwritten circles over several rural areas around the reservoir. In the back seat lay a lilac backpack, the same one Beatrice had been carrying on the day she disappeared. It was a devastating and bewildering moment, reported Detective Carvalho. We had found our prime suspect, but he was dead, likely by suicide, and there was no sign of the girl. A massive search operation was immediately organized, focusing on the areas marked on a map found in the car. Fire department crews, sniffer dogs, drones, and divers were mobilized to cover the vast area, which included stretches of dense forest and parts of the reservoir. A preliminary analysis of the body indicated that Roberto had died approximately 48 hours earlier, on the 3rd day after Beatrice's disappearance. This meant the girl could have been alone, possibly injured or in danger, for at least 2 days. During the forensic examination of the vehicle, more disturbing elements were uncovered. In the trunk, there were ropes, adhesive tape, a stained blanket, and various medications, including a bottle of chloroform, a substance used for sedation. In a compartment under the driver's seat, experts located a laptop and 3 cell phones, one of which was Beatrice's. An immediate analysis of the devices revealed that Roberto had not only created the fake profile used to lure Beatrice, but at least sent 7 other fictitious profiles across different social networks, all aimed at approaching minors. His message history indicated that he had been in simultaneous contact with 4 other girls, all between 11 and 14 years old, using the same grooming techniques. Even more disturbing was the discovery of a digital folder containing photos of numerous teenage girls, some clearly taken without their knowledge in public places like schools, parks, and shopping malls. Among the images, 2 missing girls from similar cases that had been connected during the investigation were identified. What we uncovered was the profile of a meticulous serial predator who had been operating undetected for years, explained Detective Claudia Moreira. He had developed an elaborate system to identify, gain the trust of, and eventually abduct his victims. As the analysis of the devices continued, the search for Beatriz intensified. Military police helicopters flew over the region while more than 200 agents scoured the area on foot. The local community also mobilized, with residents and fishermen assisting in the search. Late in the afternoon of the fifth day, an alarming discovery was made. About a mile from where the car was found, near a small abandoned building that was once a fishing club, the sniffer dogs had a strong reaction, indicating the possible presence of human remains. The old structure, partially destroyed and overgrown with vegetation, was secured with a new padlock, a stark contrast to the deteriorated state of the rest of the building. Firefighters forced their way in and, in the dark and stuffy interior, found evidence of recent occupation. Water bottles, food wrappers, a thin mattress, and, most importantly, bloodstains on the concrete floor. The search team immediately expanded the perimeter around the building, as the sun set, making the search even more challenging. Lanterns and floodlights were set up to allow the work to continue through the night. At 7:23 p.m., the tense silence that hung over the operation was broken by a shout. One of the firefighters, about 200 yards from the abandoned building, had located what appeared to be a body, partially buried under leaves and branches in an area of dense woods. The area was immediately cordoned off, and forensic experts were urgently summoned. The darkness and the need to preserve evidence made the process meticulous and slow. A tent was erected and generators were brought in to illuminate the scene as the technicians worked. In the early hours of the sixth day after her disappearance, the news everyone had feared was confirmed. The body was that of Beatriz Oliveira Santos. The girl was wearing the same clothes from the day she vanished, showed signs of violence, and according to the preliminary analysis, had died between 24 and 36 hours before being found. The news devastated her family and moved the entire country. At the Santoses' home, friends and relatives gathered to support the parents who required medical attention after receiving the confirmation. There are no words to describe the pain of losing a daughter this way. Her father, Paolo, stated in a brief address 2 days later, "Now we fight for justice and to ensure that no other family goes through what we are going through." The detailed forensic investigation revealed the chronology of events. After meeting Beatrice at the mall, Roberto took her to the Billings Reservoir region, where he had prior knowledge of the area and the abandoned building. The analysis of the body indicated that the girl had been held captive for approximately 3 days, suffering physical and sexual violence during this period. The cause of death was identified as mechanical asphyxia, likely occurring on the 4th day after her disappearance. After the crime, Roberto attempted to hide the body in the woods and, apparently tormented by what he had done or fearing capture, committed suicide with a gunshot to the head inside his own vehicle. What makes this case even more tragic is that Beatrice was kept alive for days, which means there was a window of opportunity to rescue her, lamented Detective Carvalho. If we had identified the suspect sooner, perhaps the outcome would have been different. The in-depth analysis of Roberto Ferreira's electronic devices revealed a disturbing history of online predation. For at least 6 years, he had created dozens of fake profiles, always posing as a teenager to gain the trust of young girls. On his laptop, more than 300 conversations with minors from all over Brazil were found. Even more gravely, it was discovered that Roberto was potentially connected to at least 4 other disappearance cases in the states of São Paulo and Minas Gerais. In one case, which occurred 2 years earlier in Campinas, a 13-year-old girl was never found. The case generated a wave of national outrage and intense debates about the safety of children and adolescents on the internet. Digital security experts, psychologists, and police authorities began to warn with greater emphasis about the dangers of online grooming and the importance of parental supervision of children's digital activities. In the National Congress, Beatrice's case accelerated the passage of bills aimed at increasing penalties for crimes of pedophilia and online grooming of minors. The Beatrice Law, as it became known, was approved 6 months after the crime, establishing stricter measures against sexual predators and creating new mechanisms for monitoring suspects. Across the country, educational programs on digital safety were implemented in schools, teaching children and adolescents how to identify suspicious online behavior and the importance of never sharing personal information or arranging meetings with people known only virtually. For the São Paulo Civil Police, the case resulted in the creation of the Specialized Division of Cybercrimes against Children and Adolescents, with investments in technology and specific training for investigators. The unit began to work preventively, monitoring social networks and websites for predators before they could cause harm. Beatrice's parents, after months of intense grief, founded the NGO Digital Angels, dedicated to raising awareness among families about the dangers of the internet and offering psychological support to victims of online crimes. The initiative quickly gained national recognition, establishing partnerships with schools, technology companies, and government agencies. "We can't bring our daughter back, but we can honor her memory by saving other children," Marcia declared in an interview 1 year after the tragedy. "We want Beatrice's legacy to be a safer world for all children." The impact of the case also extended to social media platforms, which faced growing pressure to implement more effective age verification measures and monitor potentially dangerous conversations involving minors. Some companies developed specific algorithms to detect grooming patterns and alert systems for parents about suspicious activities. The story of Beatrice, though profoundly tragic, provoked a significant transformation in how Brazilian society addresses the digital safety of its youth. Statistics in the years following the crime showed a 27% reduction in reported cases of online grooming, a change largely attributed to the awareness campaigns and new legal measures. At the site where Beatrice's body was found, a small plaza was built in her memory, featuring a reading bench and a yellow ipê tree, her favorite flower according to friends. The space became a point of reflection on the protection of childhood and the vigilance required in the digital world. This case reminds us that behind every online profile there can be someone very different from who they appear to be. Noted Detective Claudia Moreira, who began giving lectures on the topic across the country. The internet offers predators an anonymity and an ease of access to victims that did not exist in the past, and we must always be one step ahead. The investigation into Beatrice's case also led to the reopening of several unsolved disappearance cases throughout Brazil, with a new emphasis on a possible connection to cybercrimes. 2 of these cases were subsequently solved, bringing some measure of comfort to families who, like the Santos family, had faced the unbearable pain of uncertainty and finally of loss. For the investigators involved, the experience left deep scars. No amount of training fully prepares an officer to deal with crimes against children, confessed Detective Renato Carvalho, who later specialized in digital crimes. "Every case like this reminds us of the importance of our work and the responsibility we have to the victims and their families." 7 years after the crime, Beatriz Oliveira Santos's name remains alive not only in the memory of her loved ones, but in the continuous prevention work her case inspired. Her story, though painful, has become a powerful warning about the invisible dangers that can hide behind a screen. The Brazil that once had lenient legislation for cybercrimes against minors now has one of the strictest legal frameworks in the world in this area. The Beatrice Law evolved with subsequent amendments establishing a national registry of sex offenders and an integrated monitoring system among different public security agencies. In 2028, on the eve of the law's 5th anniversary, the Ministry of Justice released a report detailing its achievements. A 43% reduction in online grooming cases, the early identification of over 800 potential predators, and the rescue of 72 minors who were in imminent danger. The Digital Angels NGO, founded by Beatrice's parents, expanded its operations significantly, establishing 27 centers in all Brazilian capitals and assisting over 15,000 families annually. In 2027, the organization received the UNICEF Global Child Protection Award. When we started this work, it was a way to channel our pain into something positive, explained Paulo Santos at the award ceremony. We never imagined it would become such a comprehensive movement. Every child we managed to protect is a small victory in Beatrice's name. Marcia Oliveira, who returned to her studies and became a psychologist specializing in childhood trauma, became a national authority on supporting families of victims. Her book, After the Silence, The Journey of Healing from Violence, published in 2026, became an essential guide for mental health professionals. In education, Beatrice's legacy manifested in the mandatory inclusion of digital safety in the national school curriculum. Since 2026, all schools are required to offer age-appropriate programs on online dangers. Children are born into a digital world and must learn to navigate it safely, just as we teach them to cross the street, defended the Minister of Education at the time. Beatrice's case showed us this is not an option but an urgent necessity. The investigation also revolutionized police methods. The specialized division created in São Paulo became a model for similar units in every state, with officers using undercover online profiles to identify and capture predators. A 2029 study revealed that investigative techniques developed from the case had helped solve 17 cold cases of disappearance. In the community where Beatrice lived, the impact was even more profound. The school she attended was renamed the Beatriz Oliveira Santos Municipal School and implemented one of the country's most comprehensive digital safety programs. The Jardim Peri neighborhood, once defined by its struggles with infrastructure and security, mobilized to forge a community network of protection for its children, with neighbors trained to identify suspicious behavior in situations of risk. A tragedy like the one we endured can either shatter a family and a neighborhood, or it can unite everyone for a greater cause, reflected a neighbor of the Santos family in a special report 10 years after the case. We chose the more difficult path to transform our pain into positive action. On what would have been Beatrice's 18th birthday in 2029, the National Center for the Digital Protection of Children and Adolescents was inaugurated in Brasília. The complex, bringing together researchers, police officers, psychologists, and technology specialists, became an international benchmark in developing strategies to combat cybercrimes against minors. During the inauguration ceremony, Paulo and Marcia planted a yellow ipe tree in the complex's central garden, beside a plaque inscribed, "In memory of Beatrice and all the children who lost their lives to violence. May her story continue to save lives." The Beatrice case, which initially represented one of the darkest facets of the digital age, evolved into a turning point for Brazilian society. It was a tragedy that, through the immense pain it caused, awakened a collective conscience and mobilized efforts that have resulted in a safer environment for millions of children. As forensic psychologist Totira Helena Campos, who followed the case from its inception, observed, some tragedies unfortunately must happen to awaken society to dangers that were there all along. making us safer in the long run. The Beatrice case showed us that technology advances far more rapidly than our capacity to shield our children from the perils it brings. The difference now is that we are aware and we are taking action. In an ever more connected world where the boundaries between the real and the virtual grow increasingly thin, the story of Beatrice remains a permanent reminder. It reminds us that behind every profile, every message, and every shared photo, there are real people, some vulnerable, others with dark intentions, and the responsibility to protect the most vulnerable is and always will be a collective one.